In this video, I'm going to talk about things that you can do to start initiating a generative vocabulary approach in your classroom. I'm a strong believer in making small changes in life. And in fact, I believe that in classrooms, making small changes is the best way in which to affect changes in students' achievement and also in their learning. We don't have to wait for a revolution. I'm going to suggest that there are 3 things. Now, I'm not saying you need to do all of them, but there are 3 ways in which you can start supporting a generative vocabulary approach. The first is through having consistent conversations with students. These conversations don't have to be long, but I want to underscore the consistency. We want to keep talking with students and keep having them talk about, remember I'm saying conversation, not a monologue. We want students also to be describing what they're anticipating when they approach a new text. Students need to be aware that the majority of the words in texts are continually going to come from this group of 2,500 morphological word families. And that in any text, they can anticipate new words related to topic, related to author's style, and so on. That's a given, and students need to be aware of that, especially the part where they're understanding that the majority of words are ones they've encountered before and that they're pretty good with those words. The second way in which you can initiate small changes has to do with what I call word reminders. I've actually generated a list of word reminders on this chart. Actually, the word reminders go very, very closely with conversations. These are ways in which we summarize something we've talked about, some feature that we've had some lessons on perhaps, but that we are aware of. For example, that words cluster together in certain kinds of ways in stories and in certain ways in informational texts. We're aware that words are in morphological families across any kind of text. So having these words on a chart in a classroom, individual copies for students, this is a way in which students can review these important ideas about texts and how vocabulary works in them. The third idea has to do with some resources that I've provided at Text Project. That's the open access website that I work on. At Text Project, we've got 2 resources. One that supports small changes with regard to the synonym clusters in narrative or stories. And the second has to do with clusters of content words that you'd expect to see in informational text and also as the source of context and so on in narrative text. So the first reference is something that I call Synonym Sets. And these sets pertain to 20 very important networks of words. I analyzed thousands of texts to identify a group of very prolific synonym clusters. These synonym clusters fall into 4 main groups: ways of communicating, ways of expressing emotions, traits of characters and of settings, and also ways in which characters move. And I identified for each of the clusters a key word, a word that students are very likely to know, words like stop and go. And in this case, the example that I'm showing, the word argue, a word that most kids know about. But what we want to do is to help them see other words that authors use to communicate the same idea. Because we remember that in stories, authors don't keep repeating the same word over and over and over again. So for each of these words, there's a lesson for you at Text Project. And again, it's not the expectation that you're going to show students this entire semantic map for a word cluster, but that in fact you might have students contribute with giving post-it notes or something of that order, where we're expanding that network so kids are actually involved in that activity. The second resource at Text Project are pictures related to concept maps. There are 15 really critical topics that appear a lot in informational text and also are the basis for context in stories. Words, for example, around transportation, words around nature, words around water. It turns out we have lots of words for water, which makes a lot of sense in that our planet is 75% water. What we've done is we've taken a network of showing all the words in that cluster, and then we've divided them into more specific areas so kids can get an understanding of how the domain works. And we've included pictures, and this is really, really useful for students who are English language learners. So those are some of the resources that are available. I'm suggesting conversations, word reminders, and graphics like the synonym clusters and also the concept maps. And as I said, small changes are a great way to get big results.